Hello everybody, welcome back to my workshop. Unfortunately, the video that I'm posting today I've lost some footage for. So back in the October, kind of late fall time frame, I started filming projects once again because I had my camera fixed and I had rearranged the shop so that the filming wouldn't be kind of as obstructive in my process. Because if I only have an hour after work to work on a project, but it takes me an hour to set up for filming, then it's a no-go. So in that process, I got the camera working again, but I found out that some of my hard drives, one of them in particular, that was my most reliable one, conked out. It died. And I lost little bits of footage for several projects. My table saw partial restoration project, this live edge walnut couchside table project, and a couple of others. It's unfortunate. It's the cost of working with some of the original equipment that I had for filming this channel. And as the channel progresses and as I grow, I'll replace those components. But in the meantime, I try to put the footage together as best as I can for your viewing pleasure. So hopefully you get enough of the story to kind of be inspired or engaged in how I kind of worked out some of my shortfalls in terms of the tools and the skills that I have. But I wanted to make sure that I addressed a couple of comments beforehand for those of you that left comments on my last video, my shop tour 2025. So first one from Old Boy 4332. Nice job. I'm working with a small space. Challenging. Yeah, I don't know that I would consider my shop a small shop. I think the fact that it would be kind of an extra long single car garage in size or like in footprint maybe qualifies it as a small shop, but I appreciate the compliment. That encourages me. I do feel like I've really done a better job with the space that I have now than I used to, and it's certainly challenging, especially when you don't have a lot of height to work with to kind of hang things out of the way. But thanks for commenting. I appreciate it. And then Jason Parker, excited to see that I'm back on YouTube. Jason's been a supporter of this channel for a long time and was always an incredible encouragement every time I put a video out, and does some excellent filmography himself. Cinematography, whatever the appropriate word would be. And then I did get a question from Randy Wright 7933. I like the shop. Thank you very much. Was wondering what the one thing was in your small room. This is the small shop that we're sitting in. Looks like maybe a baby shark or something. This is a prized possession of mine. An excellent maker and an incredibly positive and encouraging person. He goes by the Garage Avenger. I don't think it's Garage Shop Avenger. I think it's just a Garage Avenger. And I'm going to be linking all of his information and the video where he made this down as a reply to your comment. And he made this. This is an incredibly sentimental project for me. He made this as a part of a kind of group maker Secret Santa of sorts that was happening during COVID. That project actually still happens now. It's called Fools with Tools Treasure Trade or something like that, after the Fools with Tools podcast. It's an incredibly encouraging thing. I think it's been going on for maybe about 6 years. I think I've participated 2 or 3 times. But yeah, he went back in my Instagram and found out that the Georgia Aquarium is one of my absolute favorite places on this planet. And whale sharks in particular are one of my favorite animals. And the work that the Georgia Aquarium does for these, just in general, and for the whale sharks in particular, including their just absolutely enormous display for their cylindrical tank, is just amazing. And it's just one of my favorite places on Earth. So he made this for me. It's an articulated whale shark. He couldn't quite get all of the kinematics to work exactly how he wanted. He goes over that a little bit in his video from a few years ago. And I couldn't quite get the kinematics to work either. So, but it's very important to me. So when I was kind of making this small space as a backdrop for filming, this was very quick to go up once I had kind of dusted it off and repaired the pin for the tail section, which still occasionally comes off. So yeah, go check Garage Avenger out. I'll leave his details below. And thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your day. Unfortunately, one of the casualties of some of my earlier equipment, in addition to the hard disks, was the microphone that used to attach to the DSLR camera that I use for a lot of my better filming. Some of the videos and pictures that have the much higher quality and much clearer picture are from a Canon T5i DSLR. Unfortunately, the microphone that I used to have that attached to that, something's definitely messed up, whether it was dropped or something along the way. The only sound clip out of any of the group of few dozen clips that I took had this terrible like techno screeching sound. So unfortunately, for the next couple of videos that I produce, there's going to be some substitute audio that's going to be put in, so there isn't just dead silence. What you see me doing here is waxing the bottom of a piece of scrap plywood, or cut off plywood. It's not quite a scrap yet. But I was waxing the bottom of it because I needed some way of flattening the live edge walnut piece that I'm using for this couch side table. Flattening it by hand, just I don't have the hand tools that could really do this in a way that was both efficient or to the quality that I needed it to be. But I needed a way to flatten this slab. It wouldn't fit through my planer. It wouldn't fit through the planer of the lumber yard that I go and source a lot of my wood from. I couldn't do it by hand, and it was too much material for a belt sander. So I needed to do something. I think I saw this on one of those like 5-minute hack type videos you'll see on YouTube or pop up as an ad. And it's like, okay, I can give that a try. As long as I'm always going in the correct orientation of the 1.25" flattening bit I have here, then that would work out just fine. And then when I get down to the last little nub, I can do that part with my hand plane with no problems. I think the plane that I have is called a jack plane. It's by Buck Brothers, I think. I'm not sure what the actual name of it is, so if any of you know, this is a little block plane, but the one I use later in this video, I think it's called a jack plane. I would really like a Stanley jointer, because I'm using hand tools more and more often, as I'm finding that the more furniture I build, the more appreciation I have for hand tools. It did a great job. I knew ahead of time that this wasn't going to be perfect, that it was going to leave a little bit of a nub at the end that I wouldn't be able to cut off. So I was able to take a jack plane, take care of that last little nub at the end. But I'm going to keep this thing. There's a couple of improvements I would do. I think in the future, the next time I'm flattening something, I'm going to put some sides on it. I did notice, I think in the past that I didn't film, because I think I did 3 passes or 4 passes in total, I noticed that there's a little bit of a flex to it if I didn't hold it in exactly the right spot. And I would like to put some rails on either side of this so that it's much stiffer. And then I'm probably going to reorient the handle. I only used the handle a couple of times, and the rest of the time I was holding it there in the middle because it just balanced better and I had more control. So I was really surprised for something that was kind of gimmicky, that I wasn't really convinced of. This really got me out of the bind of how to flatten this thing to a surface finish I could actually work with. This wouldn't have helped me if a lot of ridges were left over that I had to post-process. But because it actually left me with a surface finish that was just visual lines and not actual detectable lines. You couldn't really feel them with your finger or catch them with your fingernail. Then I was able to sand it down really well and take care of business after that. I will say I was impressed overall that this battery-powered trim router did the job that it did. If I can kind of improve the jig a little bit the next time that I'm making a table, I'm probably going to use that jig again, and I think those couple of improvements will make it a pretty invaluable fixture or a jig to have hanging up on the wall. The surface finish was pretty good, but because I think I probably could have sprayed down the top with water and ironed it to get some of the kind of visual imperfections out without using a belt sander. But the belt sander would took me about maybe 10 minutes with an 80 grit belt to get an overall even sand. And then I didn't want to sand out all of those 80 grit lines. So this is when I took my jack plane, I think it's called a jack plane, and I put a much better surface finish over the entire piece. I probably only did this for about maybe 15 minutes, and there's a couple of places that weren't perfectly flat. You watch me take the edge of my scraper, my planer, and check for flat in a couple of places. I did that 3 or 4 times where I felt kind of a hollow, and then I would scrape a different area to get it all flat, and then I got this thing all flat maybe about 15 minutes. Anywhere I kind of had a little bit too much pressure on the belt sander, and I got rid of all those kind of nasty 80 grit belt sander lines. And then starting with 80 grit again, I took my orbital sander with a vacuum and made pretty quick work of this thing. If you're patient, and especially if you have some music going, it's pretty easy to sand something down this size or small tabletop. There's a lot of people that don't like sanding, but it can be a pretty therapeutic process. One of the ideas that my wife came up with a different tabletop was to fill knot and bug holes with brass rod instead of epoxy. I actually really like that detail because then you have this little shiny pop and a witness mark of where some other nature happened. So instead of getting rid of or hiding a knot hole or a bug hole, I like the idea that it's kind of a celebrated feature. So using my drill block, I was able to find the perfect size brass pin, and that corresponded with the perfect size drill bit. And I was able to, I think it was one bug hole, and the other ones were knot holes where the crotch of the piece came together. And then I put plastic down so that when I use the CA glue to put in the roughed up brass pins, that there is no issue. And the cool thing about brass and aluminum is that if you are careful, you can use conventional woodworking tools to cut them and machine them and manipulate them. So I had a Japanese style pull saw from Harbor Freight that I've had for almost a decade now, and I've been using it in the months since doing this project. I've used it a few times, and I was pretty careful with how I cut these. Don't go too quick. It's able to clear the chips away really well. You don't overwork the steel on your saws, and you can work with brass this way. And didn't dull the saw, didn't have any problems after that, and I just really enjoy the brass detail that goes on with this walnut tabletop. It's probably one of my favorite things about this. Not only is the slab itself beautiful, but that brass detail I have on this and the brass detail kind of where it was. I haven't seen it before. I didn't look for it. I had never seen it before, but on a Purple Heart table, I also used this as a detail, and it came out great. I didn't know exactly what size I wanted to make this. I wanted to square it off a little bit, but it was important to me that I treated the whole surface and finished the whole surface perfectly, and then trim it to size so that I knew and had as many options as possible in case I made a mistake. And then I selected a couple of angles. I was having a hard time holding it down, but I put some tape there to protect the top so I didn't accidentally gouge anything with a burr or anything on the stamped metal circular saw. After a little bit of waffling, I kind of figured out exactly where I want to cut, and this went pretty smoothly. One of the great benefits and upgrades of this shop was getting that Harbor Freight workbench. I've just about outgrown it, But every day I'm using that workbench. It just provides so much more clamping options than just the assembly table alone that I typically used. Unfortunately, this is one of those clips that got cut short and I don't have any more footage, but using some less aggressive sandpaper, I think this was 120, I went around and most of this was already debarked, but then I went around and I smoothed out all of the live edge of this walnut table. And then to give a little bit of a waterfall effect, I had one large trunk facing piece and then the two limbs. The trunk facing piece, I think I gave a 3/8, might have been a full 1/2 inch round over. And then for everything else, got a 1/4 inch round over. And it just made it look a lot more proportional. And it kind of fed into the live edge look of this. But this was an incredibly intimidating project. I really wanted to give something that was as high quality as possible to this particular customer. And this was a beautiful piece of wood that was really testing my skill level on being able to keep everything flat so that it was a fine piece of furniture when I was done with it. And I do think I succeeded. I think I really got it there. So I've definitely noticed that my skills are improving, and now I have to start improving my processes. So it's good that the skills have been increased, but if it takes me too long to do that, then that isn't as helpful. So I really want to work on some of these processes so that I do things in a little bit better order. I resended this a few times because I didn't understand the best way to apply finish. I should have gotten the back of this completely finished 100% and then worked on the top. Because what ended up happening is I left little indents in some of the softwood on the top from those painter standoffs, and that was something that cost me a couple of days. My ability to finish projects has really increased, so I've increased my skill in that area, but then I was let down a little bit by the process. So it's just all part of learning and growing and gaining more experience. So the customer was nice enough to send me a couple of finish shots of the project. I really appreciate that. There's a couple of when I assembled it into the cast iron stand that I bought online, and then a couple next to their couch. So the project came out great. I really like it, and as always, I hope it's a legacy item that's around and lasts for a long time. This was a good opportunity for me to practice my voiceovers, and I'm sure I'll get better and better at them. I had a lot of fun on this project. I learned a lot, and I hope you guys are inspired or at the very least were entertained watching it. Thanks for watching and for sticking around, and catch you next time.